guys, this is Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
The ML Sports Platter is back with you all over the major platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, you name it. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L Sports, and of course Instagram, Mike L Sports 1979. The Platter is brought to you by Bryant and Stratton College, the Al and Angus Pub, the Vince Aguirre Consulting Group, and our great friend over at State Farm Insurance, South Bay Road. Get a free rate quote if you're in and around Central New York or the greater New York State from Matt Graham of State Farm. Go ahead and log on to State Farm's website in the Central New York region. That's SyracuseInsuranceAgent.com. SyracuseInsuranceAgent.com. Get a free rate quote today and ask Matt what is the rate drop that you can get. If you need auto, if you need life, if you need health, property, business, all insurance products there are available with Matt Graham. He's been serving the greater Central New York area since 2016, actually, having his nice little 5-year anniversary this year. So go see Matt Graham, South Bay Road in North Syracuse. SyracuseInsuranceAgent.com is the website. So let me get into really what looks like a pretty, I think, exciting NHL playoff picture. I mean, this looks awesome. And as we record this, Vegas clinched a playoff berth. They beat the Sharks to tie their record with an 8th straight victory. They're the first in the NHL, as I record this, to qualify for a playoff berth. And within me setting the NHL playoff picture and kind of some ideas, some matchups and things, I'd love to see. I will kind of weave into the conversation, that I just don't think that hockey, has ever been better. I really don't remember a time when the NHL was this good. I know it's not as popular as, the NFL and the NBA to a degree in certain markets. I know it's not as important as, even in Major League Baseball, certainly way, 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 way behind, college football, and in March, college basketball for sure. But try telling everyone in Canada, that it doesn't matter. I mean, that's their home sport, and the ratings are through the roof for the Canadian division. I mean, they're just through the roof. I mean, Hockey Night in Canada, TSN, Sportsnet. I mean, these channels are just blowing ratings through the roof. And if you don't believe it, go listen to Spit and Chicklets. Go listen to 31 Thoughts. Go listen to other hockey pods. Go listen and go read people talk about it. The ratings are fantastic because the product is great. And they love the product even when it's a little bit down. But it's not down. It's way, way up. And, go try telling people in Tampa, defending Cup champions, the organization they've built there. They've really made Tampa a hockey hotbed, I think, in the South when they were doubted. They now have 2 Stanley Cups to their resume since they expanded. There are teams that have been in the NHL for, 51 years now. Canucks, Sabres, and they don't have one. They've been to the Cup Finals, but they don't have one. Tampa's done a great job. Try telling the people in Vegas that hockey's not important, right? And one of the best teams in the league since they expanded. And frankly, one of the great sports stories of the last 50 years that the Vegas Golden Knights even got to the Cup Finals. Had they won, I think it probably would have been the best. Go try telling people in major markets, New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia. You know how many people love their Flyers in Philly? I mean, how many people are passionate about that? Going back to the Broad Street Bully days, people can't wait to pack the Garden again. The Rangers, hottest team in hockey up until getting smacked the other night. But, hockey matters in a lot of these parts. And I just think the product's amazing. I don't think it's ever been better. I was thinking about this last night when I was watching the Blackhawks score. I think it was 3 in the third period and then win in OT. and I love 3-on-3 overtime, by the way. I just think the 3-on-3 is so unbelievable. It's up and down, end to end, tons of crisp passes, so much open ice. It isn't even funny. I really love it. I really love the overtime. But I'm watching it and I'm going, when was it ever better? You know, when was the NHL ever better? I mean, 5 years ago? No, because 5 years ago kind of pushed into where we are now. You know, it certainly wasn't in the early 2000s. I think when Ovechkin and Crosby came in, 15, 16 years ago, which is just mind-boggling to think about. Mind-boggling. I think at that particular moment, I think that, the NHL, maybe with a new wave of superstar power, and these guys are like LeBron in the sense that, they were so hyped up coming in, and all they've done is just exceed the hype. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I mean, these guys are, they're in Mount Rushmore discussions right now. I mean, that's, that's how great they've been. Ovechkin, has been playing since 2001. Professionally, but since 2004, with the Capitals, he was picked first overall in that 2004 draft. And then Crosby was first overall in the 2005 draft. So you had a back-to-back year sort of thing where, people were kind of anointing it as, well, here we go, like, this is Mario Lemieux, right? This is Mario Lemieux, Wayne Gretzky type stuff here, right? Mario was the first overall pick in the 84 draft. You had Gretzky, obviously, a few years before that. As we know, he was a top scorer in the World Junior Ice Hockey Championships. June 78, he signed with the Indianapolis Racers of the WHA. Played a little bit there, but then he was traded to the Edmonton Oilers. When the WHA folded, the Oilers then joined the NHL. And then, of course, forget about it. So, it wasn't quite the same as the draft with Mario. He was playing in World Juniors and just signed. And then, it was signing, then traded, and then whammo into the NHL. And then we know that when Wayne Gretzky went to the Kings, the league just completely changed. And Wayne Gretzky going... I don't think people realize this, but Wayne Gretzky, and I think that the game back then was probably pretty darn good and pretty darn healthy as well. Obviously, wide open. Goaltending was horrific then, but I think now we've actually got a pretty good, balance, between great players and size and speed and, in skill and youth and, everything that goes into it, and they're all doing it, by the way, on that little blade. But they're doing it at such a high level. I think offensively back, when Gretzky came on the scene, and then a few years after Lemieux, and then you had Brett Hull, and you had Yzerman, and you had all these other players that were just up and down the ice. Messier, craziness into the mid late 80s into the 90s. The Luc Robitailles of the world. Then you were getting into the Paul Kariya, Pavel Bure. Some of that international Russian speed, and other Euro games like Jaromir Jagr, that was probably a pretty darn good era too. Goaltending was so bad in the 80s. We got a nice little balance right now between really, really good goaltending and guys who can just flat out beat the guys between the pads or anywhere else, top shelf, low shelf, sides, again, size, speed, youth, skill set. It's been absolutely mind-boggling to watch the product of the NHL. And, I think Gretzky, Lemieux into that little 8 to 10 year era was unbelievable. The 90s bothered me a little bit because of all the trapping and the two-line passing. And, I think the NHL, I really got to give them, and then Gretzky, of course, I got to finish that point. Gretzky going to the West Coast, the LA Kings, it was a heartbreaker for Canada. It was a heartbreaker for Edmonton. I mean, their chosen son, so to speak, and their chosen sport going to LA. But by the same token, we look back at the history of the origins of certain things happening in the NHL with certain teams, that opened the door for a lot of different things. That opened the door for a lot of markets. The Kings, all of a sudden in the Forum, they were sharing it with the Lakers. They became a a must-see attraction as well. You know, it wasn't just Magic Johnson and the Lakers. Now they had a new sheriff in town, and Wayne Gretzky was it. And so now all of a sudden these celebrities who were, you know, sitting courtside, the Jack Nicholsons and everyone else, you know, they were going out to the Kings games, you know, and it was, you know, you had a couple of star-studded events per week in LA in the same building. And then them getting really, really good and showing their might, all of a sudden, right? San Jose Sharks, right? Anaheim Ducks, Mighty Ducks, off the movie, of course, a little bit too, but the expansion of Gretzky or I should say the trade of Gretzky really led to the expansion of California hockey, West Coast hockey. The Coyotes come on the forefront. You know, Minnesota goes to Dallas in the move. You know, the Florida Panthers and the Sun Belt in Tampa Bay and Carolina, you know, moving from Hartford, which was, I thought, a little bit of a heartbreaker there. You know, Quebec moving to Colorado. There was Midwest, West Coast, Southern Belt expansion that all kind of really happened off of that Gretzky trade. And I think, you know, now you look at the sport and you look at just the crazy balance and the unbelievable ability. It was really, really, really a great night again last night as I record this, thinking about, you know, the past years and what eras, and I credit Gary Bettman, I credit the NHL for making a lot of the rule changes. I really do. I think when you look at the two-line pass, it was such a horrendous, every single time, you know, you had just think of it this way. Sergei Fedorov, Steve Yzerman, two Hall of Famers, right? Playing on those Stanley Cup teams with the Red Wings in the 90s, right? 97 and 98, they won back-to-back. Great teams. Scotty Bowman, puck possession, the Russian Five, the whole deal, right? Think about Sergei Fedorov passing to Steve Yzerman or Nick Lidstrom. Passing up ahead to anyone, Fedorov, Yzerman, right, and it going across two lines and just being blown dead, right? Pathetic. You are wasting an unbelievable opportunity to not only have a scoring chance, but to have the building, if you're playing at home, to have the building rise as one. Right? I mean, that's really what we're looking at here. The excitement level. Odd man rushes. Scoring chances. 2-on-1s. I mean, think about fast breaks in basketball, right? Think about, I mean, baseball's product is so bad, but think about baseball when, you know, you got a guy on second base and you know, it's late in the game, though they put him on second base as that's a handout. It'll be cartoon baseball right now, let me tell you. But you get the picture. Let's say like 8th inning, and you know, you're tied, and Mike Trout's up, and there's a guy on second, and he gets a base hit, and that guy's coming around third base, and the outfielder's charging the ball, right? Those kind of moments in sports. You know, college football, you know, Auburn, Alabama, late in a game, you know, at the goal line, right? An exciting punt or kick return. You know, Patrick Mahomes with the ball in the last 2 minutes. Those type moments in sports. Hockey, getting rid of the two-line pass, changing a little bit of the goalie equipment, etc., and making some major changes, I think really, really helped the game as well. Yeah, the influx of Ovechkin and Crosby, you got out of the trap system of the 90s, coupled with those aforementioned rule changes. I just think it was a fantastic maneuver by the NHL, and I think it's all led to, going back to the Lemieux, Gretzky, you know, Gretzky, then Lemieux, I guess, you know, the infusion, and then all the other Hall of Famers I mentioned, right into, you know, an era that was, you know, a little bit dominated by silly rule changes and the trap system and TV, like Fox trying to put a glowing puck together, etc. But then the NHL realizing where they needed to make moves and, you know, better aboard better, you know, people getting on board, better with the marketing and such. And then this, the new influx sort of Ovechkin, Crosby into, star after star after star after star after star. Young, fast, skill set through the roof, big dudes, the Nathan McKinnons and the Connor McDavids, and they just keep Austin Matthews and Eichel and Pasternak, and these guys just liney, and they keep coming one after another, and the defensemen, and Cal McCarr, and the Lafrenières, and the Capo Cacos, and I mean, it's absurd. I mean, you go on and on, with these guys, Stone and the Carlson guys in Vegas, and obviously guys in between, not quite as young, but not quite as old. I mean, the Patrick Kanes of the worlds. And then you've got still elite goaltending that we've seen through the years with guys like Marc-Andre Fleury. Look at this kid, Adam Fox, and with the Rangers, and all the collection of players, Tampa, with Kucherov, who's, been injured. You look at Adam Fox in New York, I mentioned him, but, Victor Hedman and these wicked defensemen, the slap shots, and the size and the ability and the puck carrying is just, it's absurd what we have going on in the NHL. It's just, the state of hockey, I just think it's fantastic. Been loving watching all of these guys. Dougie Hamilton, there's another one. Dougie Hamilton, coming onto the scene here with Carolina, he's 27. I mean, there's so many guys, age 18, 19, 20 to like 27, 28, and then you have the Patrick Kanes, and then above that, the Crosbys and the Ovechkins and that group and that era, and they're all tied in there. And like I said, you still have really, really solid, good goaltending. Swayman and Gustafsson and, Vasilevsky with the Tampa Bay Lightning, Andre Fleury, Robin Leonard doing his thing. You got some good stuff. Oh, Peter Mrazek in Carolina. You got good stuff there. The collection of guys in Boston. I mentioned Pasternak, but, you look at Bergeron and Marchand, guys who I think are building Hall of Fame careers. So I think the NHL is in an unbelievable spot. I think it's super healthy. It's super fun. And with that, let's talk a little playoff picture here on the ML Sports Platter, brought to you by our great friends over at Stanley Law Offices, Barks and Rec Doggy Daycare, and Rosie's Corner. If you are in and around Central New York, go on over to Rosie's Corner. Pizza, wings, pasta, hot and cold subs, and more. They've got it all going on at Rosie's Corner, a proud ML Sports Platter sponsor. Don't forget about Fish Friday every week. Mac and cheese available on Thursdays and Fridays as well. So the playoff picture, Vegas is clinched. And as we know, the first four teams in each division will advance. So in the Honda West, got to get that sponsor in there. In the Honda West, Vegas, Colorado, Minnesota, Arizona, and you get close quarters here as we record this. Arizona, just a point ahead of St. Louis. You got San Jose, a few points behind. Los Angeles still right there as well. I'd probably say Anaheim at this point, 10 points out as we record this, of a spot probably out, but it's tight, man. 5 points separating Arizona, St. Louis, San Jose, and Los Angeles. And I got to say, with X amount of games left here, and what are they playing, a 56-game schedule, these teams, all they've done is play each other all year within the division. That's all they've done is play each other. They've got to be absolutely, positively so sick and tired of each other at this point. Battling and jockeying for position in the postseason. They got to be so sick and tired of it. So sick and tired of playing each other. And that may make the games even more fun here down the stretch. Because not only do they hate each other, but, it's like, we hate you so much, we don't want to see you in the postseason, right? Maybe there's something will happen, extra bad blood between Anaheim and let's say the Coyotes, and, they play each other once or twice down the stretch. Anaheim say, these guys, we don't want these guys in the playoffs, screw that. But I think Vegas right now, I mean, they're them in Colorado. I know there's only a few points between Minnesota and Colorado and a couple more with Vegas, but to me in the West, Vegas and Colorado, they look spectacular. I think those two are actually the front runners for I want to say West, West, if we had East and West, right? I guess the Central Division, it's got a little it's got a little flavor of East, a little flavor of West in there. I like Carolina. I just mentioned Hamilton. I like the goaltending. I like the defense there. They've been pretty good. Aho's a stud. Tampa Bay is still obviously right there. They'll make the playoffs. They'll be a jumbled bunch for that fourth spot. I've been really impressed with Chicago this year. This was supposed to be a major rebuild year for them, and yet Patty Kane and company have been really, really good in terms of making some headway. Just a few points out of a playoff spot. That will go to the end between the likes of Chicago, Dallas, and Nashville for that last spot. Nashville's solid. They don't blow me away. I don't have them on the short list of cup contending. Then, there's teams that have more points than others that I don't think are as much of a threat. Even Carolina with the 65 as we record this, Florida, I don't see them, even though they're ahead of Tampa Bay, I don't see them as much of a threat as Tampa. Again, it's going to be hard to repeat because it just is in sports. It's brutal. Minnesota, nice team, but not quite probably up to the upper echelon. Vegas, Colorado, Tampa, those type of teams. And then obviously in the East, the Islanders, again, same type team there. Really good team, made some moves, got Zajac, and Paul Mary from the Devils. Devils fans were pissed at that. Wanted to talk to a couple of them, actually, and they're just irate that they went to the Islanders. But, you've got them, really good team, but again, how much of a threat really are they, right? I mean, I just don't see them in that upper echelon of the Washingtons and Vegas and Colorado and Tampa. I think we're set with the four teams in the East. I do. For as hot as the Rangers had been for a few weeks stretch there, in goodness, actually it was about, a week and a half. I mean, they were spectacular. They were, Zibanejad's flying around, scoring multiple goals and hat tricks and, what was it, a 9-point game perhaps, if I can remember correctly. The youngsters, great stuff there. I mean, they've got a real big-time future there in New York. I love David Quinn's style. I love Kako. I love Lafreniere. I love the kid Adam Fox I talked about earlier. They've got some really nice pieces. Solid goaltending, depth across the board at several positions. But I think they're going to fall a little bit short this particular year because the division is so freaking brutal. I mean, if they were playing in the Central, they'd probably make the playoffs because I think they're better than Chicago, Dallas, Nashville. But in this division, you got Washington, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, and the Boston Bruins. It's very, very difficult. And then teams that already know you really, really well before in Philly and New Jersey are right there in terms of those battles. It's hard to sneak a lot of things past those teams, even though they're non-playoff teams. Buffalo has been playing better hockey as of late, of course, but they're obviously way out of it. They're, looking towards next year as usual. So the Rangers won't make it. I was hoping they would because I think it's great for hockey. I think, teams in big markets, when you're not the NFL, when you're a team like the Rangers in the big market, all it does is help the sport because people talk about the sport more, and I think that's a great thing. So I really was hoping the Rangers, I was really hoping they'd get in, but it looks like we're pretty good. They'll jockey around here to see who's first, second, and third, but I think Washington, Islanders, Pittsburgh, Boston will be in, and then in the Scotia North, which is the All Canada division. By the way, hat tip to the Vancouver Canucks with all the Corona bullshit going on. Vancouver, they didn't play hockey for 24 days, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But kudos to Vancouver. Kudos to them first and foremost, because before I even get to the entire division, they didn't play. And they were under all these restrictions, and you can't this, you can't that, you can't leave rooms, in general, but, you can't leave and you can't play. I mean, you're sitting there trying to figure out workouts and all the rest. Disaster. And they're well out of a playoff spot, partially because they're not that good, and partially because they just, they haven't played. They've got, I think a solid few guys, though, to build around here. I mean, I love the net front play this year of Bo Horvat. I didn't even get to when I was talking about the young, big skill set, speed, youth of today's NHL. I mean, Vancouver's got a couple of those guys right now. I mean, you've got a 23-year-old and Elias Pettersson. You've got Bo Horvat in there as well. Quinn Hughes is a freaking stud. By the way, can you imagine being born in 1999? Yeah, I look at some of these hockey rosters, and it's just absurd looking at how young some of these guys are. Braden Holtby, the veteran, has been he made some kind of save the other night with that pinwheel deal. They're hoping Michael DiPietro will do something. He's, again, another guy born in 99. So they've got some pieces in Vancouver. DiPietro, Quinn Hughes, Bo Horvat. Horvat is, what is he now, 26, so still pretty young. And Pettersson, and company. So they've got some nice pieces, but tip of the cap to Vancouver for coming back and, 24 days of not playing hockey, being stuck in rooms, not being able to do a lot from a practice schedule standpoint, and coming back in that fashion and winning, I just thought was so impressive, beating the Maple Leafs, the top team in the North Division. Speaking of the North Division, let's get into the rest of it. Right now, I mean, obviously Toronto has shown to be the class so far of it. Awfully hard to slow down those forwards with Marner and Matthews and company. This is a team that when they start scoring, when they start rolling, this is a team that's just, very, very difficult to stop. Very difficult to stop. And don't give them a power play. You got to deal with Matthews. You got to deal with Marner. You got Tavares. You got William Nylander. You got some major players there, some major scorers. I still think they're a little weaker on defense. And I think that could catch up with them. I think goaltending-wise, God, they have flashes, don't they, with Frederik Andersen? And then other nights you're like, what the hell happened to this guy? Actually, what's happened many times in games, goaltending across the board, actually, in that Vancouver game. You're like, what the hell is going on here? Toronto's the best team in there. I just don't know, and I put them, I think, in the second deck of cup contenders right now. I think if you had to, and as I wrap up, just a couple of more thoughts here in terms of playoff picture and some certain thoughts and matchups and all the rest. I think that main cup group, the cup contenders right there at the top, I'd have to say I got Vegas, Colorado. This is like this is the A group. Washington. Do I have anybody else in there? I mean, I know what the points say. I know, and I've watched a ton of hockey this year. And I know what Florida and Carolina have as far as points. I know what the Islanders have. Winnipeg, there's just a lot of these clubs are just a shade behind. Boston to me is always really the most dangerous. They're always dangerous. Even when they don't win the cup, they're just there. The team that nobody wants to play. I probably got Boston up at the top of that as well. Pittsburgh's been playing well, but, in a 7-game series, do I trust Boston or Pittsburgh more? Malkin hasn't been healthy. And you have to wonder if this is like the final ride for Pittsburgh, right? I mean, do they move? I just can't imagine the careers that Crosby and Malkin have. Crosby is probably the more untouchable one because Pittsburgh fans probably think of him, like the Jeter of the Penguins, right? The Jeter to the Yankees, Crosby to the Penguins, that 16-year career. You can't imagine him in another uniform. Tom Brady played and won a Super Bowl with the Bucks and is still going. We've seen Peyton Manning with the Broncos. We've seen guys move around. Jordan in a Wizards uniform. We've seen guys do it. So we'll see. I mean, it's an era where that happens a lot in sports. Ray Bourque, won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche. Played. People in Boston were obviously heartbroken by that. So we'll see what happens. But Boston looks to me, despite the points, Boston is always a scary group. I would put those clubs in there. I'd say Vegas, Colorado, Washington. Yeah, I got to throw Tampa in there because defending champs and Boston. Those big five. And then from there, I think everybody else is in that second group. All the playoff teams are in that second group. Everybody who makes it, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, the Nashvilles or the Dallas, whoever makes out of that central, the back end. It's going to be a hell of a playoff. There's no doubt about that. Now, for people who are still confused about how the NHL Playoff Bracket is going to look, I'm just going to end the pod with kind of telling people about this. Okay? Again, they're playing 56 regular season games, and here's how it's going to work once we get to the playoffs. The top 4 teams in each division, as I've mentioned, will qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs. No wild card teams. The first 2 rounds will be played within the division. As if you didn't have enough time with these teams, as if you're not sick of these teams as is. The first 2 rounds will be played within the division in a 1-4, 2-3 format. If you're an old school hockey fan, you remember old Patrick Norris, Smythe, Adams division days. That's what they used to do. For this year, it's back. It's kind of a little renaissance or a little historical throwback, right? Now, those matchups will make up the first 2 rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then it gets really interesting and a little different. The 4 teams that advance to the semifinals will then be reseeded based on their regular season point totals, and then placed into a new bracket, which is 1-4, 2-3. That means the traditional Eastern Conference champion versus Western Conference champion format, it's gonzo for this year, and all sorts of new options are suddenly available. How about this? Could you imagine Toronto and Boston? That could happen, right? That scenario is a possibility. Nathan McKinnon, Colorado, versus Connor McDavid in Edmonton, right? Those were a lot of things that, we were, well, at least the Colorado-Edmonton thing, we were hoping for, in the beginning. Edmonton, it still could have, Edmonton's a playoff team as we record this. They have 56 points. They're right there. These things, we look back at it and, oh my God, could it? It's possible. Toronto, Boston, it's possible. Again, let's just look at this again, all right? First 4, the first 4 teams make it. You play in a 1-4, 2-3 within the division, and then you get reseeded in a brand new 1-4, 2-3 based on your regular season point total. What about Pittsburgh, Tampa, Washington, Tampa, St. Louis, Dallas, Minnesota, Dallas, St. Louis, Chicago. Again, if the Blackhawks can hang on, St. Louis and Chicago go on a run to end it. All were possible then, and a lot of these things are possible now. You think about what I was just talking about. Think about this. Let's go over to just look at the East. Right? Just look at the East. The East and the North, for example. Washington, the Islanders, Pittsburgh, Boston, as I record this. That's your playoff deal. So you'd have 1-4, Washington versus Boston, Islanders versus Pittsburgh, 2-3. Let's say Boston wins and then Pittsburgh wins, right? And then let's say in the North, 1-4, you'd have Leafs and Canadians as I record this. That's how insane these playoffs are going to be. It's going to be absurd. Edmonton, Winnipeg, come on, bring it on. Let's say Edmonton wins and Toronto wins, right? Then you've got a complete reseeding based on the regular season. So with Boston moving on, in my scenario, and Pittsburgh moving on, Pittsburgh is 61 points, Boston 58. As I record this, Toronto 61, Edmonton 56. So let's just say that in the end, Toronto finishes 1, right? And Pittsburgh is behind them at 2. Well, actually, no. Let's say that, because I'm trying to figure out the 1 versus 4 and 2 versus 3 scenario to get into a Toronto-Boston situation, which it could happen. Let's say Boston stays at, behind all these guys in points, and Toronto finishes ahead out of all this group, with a 61 compared to Pittsburgh, compared to everybody, right? And so Toronto would be your number 1 because they have the most points going back to the regular season. And out of those winners I just talked about, Toronto, let's say, advances, beats Montreal. Edmonton advances, beats Winnipeg. Boston advances, beats Washington. Pittsburgh beats the Islanders. Let's say that, Boston has the 4th best points, but Toronto has the 1st most points. Ba-boom, voila, holy shnikes. You'd have Toronto playing Boston in the 1 versus 4 reseeded playoff format in the second deck, right? That second bracket based on regular season points. And then in the other game, you would have Pittsburgh facing off against Edmonton, which would be absurd because you'd have Crosby and McDavid. That Crosby, you could have Crosby, Malkin, McDavid, and Draisaitl in that series. So it's unbelievable. Those are some of the scenarios that we're looking at for the playoff format. I can't wait. I think the NHL is the best it's ever been. It's super healthy. The games are amazing. The youth, the speed, the skill set, unbelievable. The size, it's mind-boggling to watch. I cannot wait for it. So there's your little state of the state on the NHL with, I think, the game being the best it's ever been, and a little playoff picture as well as Vegas, the first team as we record this, to get in. I cannot wait. I can't wait for the matchups down the stretch, and the playoff format is going to be absurd. It's going to throw us back to those days of the interdivision, the 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, top 4 teams in the division already hate each other going into that format. And you never know. Maybe the NHL looks at this and goes, hey, I think we might have something here. Let's just keep this the way it is for the foreseeable future, 3 to 5 years. You could almost use the playoff picture the same way you have with the All-Star game, right? You had East-West, you had different formats, you had team captains picking, for a point. I remember I went to the All-Star game in Toronto in 2000. You had, the North America versus the world thing, which was pretty cool. And maybe they change the playoff format, in the collective bargaining. You go with a 5-year playoff format this way and then change it again to keep fan interest going. I can tell you one thing, Canadians won't argue it because this league has been spectacular. And oh, by the way, when you get fans back into the building, full bore, look out. Look out. The ML Sports Platter is brought to you by our great friends over at CNY Electrical, Axe Exotic Pets, Sit Means Sit Dog Training in Syracuse, and Western New York OTB. Make sure you get over to your off-track betting site all around the state of New York, Rochester, Buffalo, Syracuse, Watertown, Albany. Place those bets for all the horse races this 2021 calendar year. Also, a big tip of the cap thank you to the Swan and Whitaker families and Camillus Golf Club. They've been serving the golf community since 1962 in Central New York. Make sure you visit CamillusHillsGolfClub.com. Get your membership now. Go play Camillus, the official golf course of the ML Sports Platter. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L. Sports. The ML Sports Platter is part of the Brawl Network. Make sure you download and subscribe to get this podcast wherever you get podcasts on your smartphone device. If you have an Apple phone, it's simple. Go find the purple podcast button, tap it, hit search, type in ML Sports Platter, and off you go. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. And new and archived episodes will be delivered right to your smartphone device, available on Google, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, iHeart, Amazon Music, CastBox. Go get it all over where podcasts are found on your smartphone device. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.